Welcome to the Michael Liebowitz Show. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, continuing our series on the current status of the liberty movement. And with us today is another perfect guest to talk about it. He's the Harold E. Wirth Eminent Scholar, Chair in Economics in the College of Business at Loyola University, New Orleans. He also has been a scholar at the Mises Institute, the Hoover Institute. He previously taught at the University of Central Arkansas, Holy Cross, and Rutgers University. He's the author of over 24 books, including his most famous one, Defending the Undefendable, which was written the year I was born, 1976, and it's been translated into over a dozen foreign languages. Walter, welcome to the show.
Michael, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
So, the first two questions I have for you are: what is the liberty movement, and how long have you been involved in it?
Well, what the liberty movement is, I guess, is to promote liberty. And there are various institutions that do it. You mentioned the Mises Institute, Hoover, Reason, Cato, Free State Project, Seasteading. There are 50 state libertarian organizations. The one in Louisiana is the Pelican Institute. There are Fraser Institute in Canada. There are Mises Institutes all over the world, dozens of them, all promoting liberty in one way or another. And what is liberty? People should do whatever they damn well please, as long as they don't initiate violence against other people or their legitimately owned property. So I think that's what the liberty movement is. What was the other question?
How long have you been involved with it, and how did you get involved initially?
Right. Well, let me tell you my story.
Sure.
My story is I'm Jewish. I was born in Brooklyn, and everyone in Brooklyn, when I was a kid, I was born in 1941, was a socialist. I went to high school with Bernie Sanders. He and I were on the track team together. He and I were buddies, and my views were roughly the same as his views because, we're all a bunch of commies or socialists or whatever. And then Ayn Rand came to lecture at Brooklyn College. And I booed in his term because she was a capitalist, and capitalism is evil. And but in those days, you didn't prevent people from speaking. It was a polite boo or a polite hiss, But and then what they said at the end of the thing was, the end of her lecture, the Ayn Rand Study Club at Brooklyn College, or whatever they called it, was having a lunch in her honor, and anyone could come from the audience, even if you disagreed. And I wanted to convert her to socialism, so I went to the thing, and Ayn Rand was sitting at the head of a table, and there was Alan Greenspan, Leonard Peikoff, and Nathaniel Brandon, the usual people. It was maybe 100 people on a side, 200 people. There were only seats at the other end of the table. So I turned to my neighbor and said, capitalism is evil, socialism the way to go. What do you say? And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I was 21, 22 at the time. And Brandon maybe was 35, Rand maybe 50 years old. And I stuck my head between Brandon and Rand. And I said, there's a socialist here who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. Brandon was very nice. He said, well, there's no room at this end of the table, but I'll come to your end of the table and talk to you about it under two conditions. One, you promise not to allow this conversation to lapse after just this lunch, but we keep going until we settle it. I'm putting words in his mouth, but that was the gist of it. And two, you read two books that I'll recommend. Well, we discussed stuff at the lunch, and the two books were Atlas Shrugged and Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And I read those books, and I couldn't put Atlas Shrugged down. I mean, it's 1,200 pages, a little type. And I pretty much read the whole thing, except for Gold Speech. I never read Gold Speech. I don't know why. I read the whole thing, and I was amazed and appalled and shocked and halfway converted. And then I went to Brandon's house and Rand's house, sometimes by myself, sometimes with my roommates. And after a while, I was converted. And this was 1962 or so, or maybe 1963. I forget exactly when I was in college. And I never really got the rest of the objectivist movement, the epistemology, metaphysics, but the economics. And then I was led to Mises and Murray Rothbard, and I became an Austrian economist and a staunch libertarian and an anarcho-capitalist when I met Murray Rothbard. So that's my history of how I got into the movement.
So in 1943, three books come out. They are The Fountainhead, God of the Machine, and The Discovery of Freedom. Now, that's where I would start the liberty movement. I understand it's an arbitrary date. I'm just, for the sake of the discussion, that's where I wanted to start it. So, the strength of the liberty movement right now compared to its history going back to then, how would you assess it today?
Well, 1943 is there are worse years to start. That's not totally unreasonable. Although we did have Lysander Spooner and a few other people way before that. I once asked Murray when I met him, "How many libertarians are there in the world?" And you know what he said? 25. How many libertarians are there now? I would say 25 million. I mean, with Ayn Rand's influence and Ron Paul's influence and Milton Friedman's influence and Hayek's influence and Nozick, 25 million. So we've gone from 25 to 25 million, which is a gigantic step up proportionately. On the other hand, at that time, there were maybe 4 billion people on the planet. Now there are 8 billion. So the population doubled and we catapulted. But in terms of absolute numbers, we're more pathetic than we were then. So it depends on whether you're going to look at it proportionally to the overall population or just sheer numbers. In terms of sheer numbers, we got 25 million people. Now, look, one way to measure libertarians in the U.S. is how many people vote for the Libertarian Party. Not that the Libertarian Party is a perfect libertarian vehicle, but, the name is right, Libertarian Party. And usually the Libertarian Party gets anywhere from 0.5% of the vote to 2 or 3% of the vote. Call it 3% to be generous. But sometimes what they'll do is they'll take a survey and they'll say, do you believe in, on the right, lower taxes and free enterprise and less regulation, and on the left, legalizing prostitution, pornography, drugs, yak, yak, yak. And when you ask people like that, you get 15%. So 15% of the U.S. electorate or the U.S. Population is libertarian, because what libertarianism is we agree with the right on free enterprise and lower government and less taxes, and we agree with the left on the legalization, not the support of, but the legalization of anything between consenting adults. So I would say we got somewhere between 3 and 15% of the population, depending upon how you count it.
Earlier, when you were talking about sort of libertarian organizations, you mentioned the Mises Institute, Cato, Reason Magazine. I'd throw in the Foundation for Economic Education in there. But
Absolutely.
But the view of liberty amongst these groups is very different in a sense. Not in the sense of most people that would call themselves libertarians agree that people should be able to do whatever they want so long as they don't violate the equal rights of others to do the same. But within that, you have debates over immigration, debates over Israel, ANCAPs versus limited government types. But you would consider them all in a same broad camp, I think. Yeah. Should they be thought of in a broad camp with differences, or are they just fragments?
I think a broad camp with differences. I disagree with people on immigration, on voluntary slavery, on Israel, but I regard them as libertarians. Ron Paul is a libertarian. I think he's wrong on Israel. Murray Rothbard is a libertarian. He was wrong on voluntary slavery contracts, I think. On abortion, Ron Paul was pro-life. Murray Rothbard was pro-choice. You can't get too further apart on that issue than those two.
Yeah.
And yet, to say that they're not libertarians because they disagree on this issue, I mean, it's a complicated issue. So I'm a big tent libertarian. Everyone's a libertarian who says, well, not everyone who says they're a libertarian, because there are left-wing libertarians. Murray Bookchin and, people like that. Who's that linguist? I forget his name.
Chomsky?
Chomsky says he's a libertarian, but, he's a commie.
Yeah.
He's a commie libertarian. My big tent isn't that big.
So this is a problem for me, and I don't know which way I really go with it. One way I look at this is I can have friends that disagree with me, right? I'm not the type of person that assumes because you disagree with me, you're either a fool or a knave, right? I think that honest, intelligent people can come to different conclusions. But within the liberty movement, broadly speaking, and in this I include both objectivists and libertarians, there is a large propensity, a large number of people. Now, whether it's the majority within those groups, I don't think so, but there's large enough to where it becomes an issue, where if you disagree with them on, say, you could agree with some guys on everything. You disagree with them on intellectual property and you're non-compos mentis. You're out. You're done, right? We're not going to be hanging out or talking or anything like that. How much harm do you think that attitude takes? Or how much harm do you think that attitude has when it comes to spreading these ideas?
Very, very harmful. I mean, I sort of follow Stefan Kinsella on intellectual property. I don't believe in copyright or patents or any of that stuff. But, if you disagree, okay, so we disagree. I mean, we can still be friends. We can still cooperate on getting rid of the minimum wage law or rent control or tariffs or whatever. So I greatly regret, I've been kicked out of several groups, the Mises Institute, the Ron Paul Institute, the Future of Freedom Foundation, antiwar.com, Libertarian Institute, 5 that I remember. Others have kicked me out that I don't even know that I've been kicked out over Israel. How is that helpful to the overall movement? I think if we want to promote liberty, I think we should all say, yes, we're libertarians, but these are complicated issues and rational people can disagree because we're not as smart as we'd like to be. If we were a lot smarter, we would not disagree because we all have the same goals of liberty. So I think, to answer your question succinctly, that it's very harmful to start making schisms and say, well, you're pro-life, I'm pro-choice, so you're evil, or I'm evil, or whatever it is. Yeah. I think it's very harmful.
Israel's a very interesting thing. I've been accused both of being an ardent Zionist and a shill for the Palestinians for saying the same thing. Like, depending on who's viewing me. And my position is simple. I think that Israel is vastly morally superior to Hamas, right? I think that they're broadly a Western country. I think they've got significant problems. The state was ultimately founded in part on socialism and religion, which I don't think is good. And I think those elements are still within it, which I think is worth criticizing. I don't think that the United States should fund them or anybody else for that matter. But I do think that Israel, the people of Israel have a right to defend themselves, and the aggressors are normally the countries surrounding them. That's my viewpoint. And for that, I'm like I told you already, I'm a shill for the Palestinians because I will say we shouldn't fund Israel. And I say Israel shouldn't kill people indiscriminately. But because I say Israel, the people have a right to form their own government, their own country. Now I'm just an ardent Zionist. Now I know your view on Israel, but with complex topics like that, this is not just a simple, yes, do this, do that. You have to really know the history. You have to understand ethics. What counts as self-defense, what doesn't count as self-defense. There's the libertarian podcaster, Dave Smith, for instance. And he's very fond of saying things like the Israel genocide or the Israel's are rights violators. And when I tell him you're making moral claims here, you're stating them as if they're self-evident. But I told him I don't think you could back those moral arguments up. And he, of course, I mean, I'm small potatoes. He won't agree to debate me. But nevertheless, how big of a problem is that, do you think, that people won't do the necessary reading? And let me just go on a little, let me bloviate a little bit. I got sad a few minutes ago when you talked about being at a table and you've got Alan Greenspan, Leonard Peikoff, Nathaniel Brandon, Ayn Rand is there. And during that time, you also had Murray Rothbard, Leonard Reed, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek. I mean, the intellectual heft of that era was phenomenal. And I don't see that today. And I just wonder, this lack of research, this assuming that I'm right without actually investigating, how much of a problem is that? Or am I just reading too much into it?
Well, you made two different points. Let me address them. First of all, I hate you, and I'm getting off the show because you're evil, because you disagree with me. I'm kidding, of course. I wanted to mention money, U.S. government money to Israel. Sheldon Richman on a blog that I'm on just asked me that. Do I favor U.S. foreign aid to Israel? And I don't. I read Peter Bauer, and I know about foreign aid. It's just government to government transfers of income. It's not foreign aid. It usually ends up with money for the dictator and monuments and stuff like that, and support for socialism. However, I don't see why the U.S. can't have allies. And I don't see why the U.S. can't pay for services rendered. Israel renders services to the U.S. intelligence. Israel renders service to the United States by testing U.S. military weapons in battle conditions. And Israel is a good ally. And I don't see why under libertarianism you can't have allies. And Israel is the best ally of the U.S. So I'm against foreign aid to Israel, but I'm not against transfers of funds to Israel to help Israel fight or things like that, or military equipment. Now, with regard to us guys now versus people when I met, and the people whose names you rattled off, Hayek, in my book, Defending the Undefendable, and this was in 1976 when I was 35 years old, compared me to Mises. And I thought he was drunk when he wrote that. I mean, I'm kidding. I mean, me, little old me compared to Mises, I mean, that's crazy. But Hayek also said that each generation has to fight the same battles. And I think the reason for that is sociobiology. What we're really fighting against is biology. And we're pushing the rock of Sisyphus up, and the rock keeps coming down, and we push it up. I think that, the people nowadays, we're too young to have established much of anything yet. Well, I'm 84. I'm not that young. But we've got some very brilliant kids who are 22 years old and are writing magnificent things. They don't have much of a reputation yet. They're not Mises yet. They're not Ayn Rand. They're not Hayek. But we do the best we can. Maybe you're right. I'm not sure. I never thought about that. I mean, look at music. I'm a big fan of Mozart and Bach and Handel and people like that. And who are the musicians, the composers nowadays? They produce crap as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it's like that. I never thought about that. How do you compare the people who are now promoting liberty with the people then? Well, Ron Paul is still around. Israel Kirzner is still around.
Right. Yeah. To be fair, I was including you with that generation.
Oh, in the previous generation, but I'm still around here.
You are still around, but you were still there. You were still involved with those guys. I mean, like I even think about when I first got into reading on liberty, guys like Don Boudreaux and Sheldon Richman actually was the first person I interviewed in this series that you're a part of. And I don't know. There's part of it that I understand may just be a bias. There's always this bias, whether it be in sports or music. What came before? We always, that was much better. My era was better. I do get that. I just don't see anybody out there today that's comparable to, say, Milton Friedman. And I disagree with Friedman on a lot of things, but his ability to communicate ideas on liberty was phenomenal. And I just don't see that today. And I think that part of the problem is the urgency for podcasters to get clicks, likes, subscribers, rather than actually make arguments.
Well, there are good people now, and I consider myself of the new generation, not the old generation. I was just a kid in 1960. I was, 20 years old. I'm in the new generation. And I hate you for putting me in the old generation.
Okay, fair.
Well, look, you mentioned Milton Friedman. David Friedman does magnificent work. Sheldon Richman does great stuff. Hans Hoppe does great stuff. Stephan Kinsella does great stuff. There are a lot of good people nowadays, and then there are people that you haven't heard of. There's this kid, I'm not going to mention his name, he's 17 years old. And he is involved with Javier Milei. And by the way, Javier Milei is, worthy of being considered in the same category as Milton Friedman in terms, and Ayn Rand and Ron Paul in terms of promoting liberty. Look at what this man is doing in Argentina. He's the president of Argentina. And, we've never had a president of any major country who was a libertarian, right? So, this idea that the old guys were great and the new guys are, well, we now have 25 million. Part of it is due to the old guys, but Javier Milei is a new guy. He's a new kid on the block. I mean, 5 years ago, who ever heard of him in libertarian circles? So I think it's a very interesting issue that you're bringing up. Who's better, the new guys, and I'm a new guy, or the old guys? And I'm not sure. It's a very complicated issue. I might tend with the old guys a little bit. Nozick is an old guy, and he's great. And he's not an anarcho-capitalist, but he was great too. So I'm not sure that this is a very important issue that you're raising. In sports, it's interesting. Who would have won the New York Knicks just won the basketball game?
Yeah.
How do you compare them with the Knicks of 1971, who also won?
Right.
I
agree with that.
My view is that the new guys are way better. And how do I know that? Because we do have, in basketball, you can't tell. There's no objective criteria. But we do have objective criteria in terms of the time for the marathon. They just broke 2 hours. And then in 1956, they broke 4 minutes for the first time. Yeah. Now you look at the mile race and there are 20 guys and 15 of them are below 4 minutes. Right. So if you extrapolate that to basketball or football or baseball or anything else, the new guys are way better. And I can maybe make a case for the new guys because we stand on the shoulders of those guys.
That's true.
They didn't have anyone to stand on the shoulders of as much as we do. So we have an advantage of them. So I'm not sure about it. It's a very important, interesting question. And I've never heard about it before. But, a case can be made on both sides.
I got to say, I love that as an anarchist, you cite Milton Friedman, you cite Robert Nozick, you cite Ayn Rand, because I'm no anarchist. I mean, I've debated, and I tell people this, I've debated some of the top anarchists in the world. I've debated Michael Huemer, David Friedman, Stephan Kinsella. But yet, if I quote an anarchist, if I quote Murray Rothbard, there's people who will say, that's an anarchist. Yeah, I know. If the guy says something good that I agree with, I'm going to put it out there. What the guy has a difference on some issue, and I'm supposed to hate him now, and I can never cite the guy. If the guy tells me, "Hey, it's hot out, you need a glass of water," I should say, "Hey, you're an anarchist. I'm not drinking your water." If I disagree, I'll say so publicly. We can have a friendly debate, respectfully, and move on, and that's it. But I don't need I can learn from when I can learn. And if we differ, we differ. I mean, it's not like you're advocating, murder in the streets. You ultimately would want the same thing I want. Nozick, I think, would have wanted the same thing in terms of results. And it's a matter of, well, what's the best way to get it. So I love that approach from you.
By the way, speaking of Dave Smith, I have it all over you. He won't debate you, but he debated me. Ha ha.
I know. I listened to it on the Tom Woods show.
That's right.
I did listen. I did. I don't want to go down the Dave Smith rabbit hole. I've got quite the thing with this guy. But so who are, in your view, the promising liberty advocates that are out there today? That are younger even than Hoppe. If you want to include Kinsella, I'll take. I'll allow Kinsella humor. I think Brian Kaplan's a brilliant guy.
There is also another debate, and that is not on libertarianism but on economics. And economics is not totally irrelevant to liberty.
No.
Understatement. There are the Austrians versus the mainstream. You just mentioned Brian Kaplan. He wrote an article, "Why I'm Not an Austrian Economist." Yeah. And Guido Holtzman and I and Hans Hoppe debated him, but in a friendly way. None of us ever said, well, I don't want to ever see you again because you disagree on Austrian economics. David Friedman is not an Austrian economist. He's a critic of Austrian economics. But so there are those debates as well. I don't want to start mentioning names of kids who are 22 years old.
Okay, that's fair.
There are lots of them. I used to teach at the Mises, what do you call it? The Mises
University?
That's it, Mises University. And they'd have 200 kids. And they were brilliant kids, high school kids. I teach at Loyola University, and let me put in a commercial advertisement for them, for me at Loyola. If you're a high school kid or you're a grandfather and your grandchildren are high school kids and you want to study with me and learn something about Austro-libertarianism, come to Loyola University. I must have, about 150 co-authored articles with students of mine. I now have 12 or 13 former students of mine who are now professors of economics. And are now promoting liberty and good economics, whether it's Austrian or mainstream or whatever. So I think that then we have the Free State Project where people just go to New Hampshire and there are lots of them there. The Libertarian Party is imperfect. They're not as good a libertarian as I would like, but they're active. There are thousands of people here. So, we're now talking about, if I could switch gears a little bit, the case for optimism or pessimism.
Right.
And I'm a pessimist. I'm a big, big pessimist because I believe that we're fighting biology. And we're not going to win until 100,000 years from now. So the question arises, well, then why am I so hopped up about liberty? Because it's so much fun. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. Well, there are one or two other things, but it's the most important professional thing that I can do, and I just love it. So I'm going to keep promoting liberty and good economics, even though I think that we're fighting biology. And so I'm a real pessimist in overall. I don't think that you're going to become president or I'm going to become president of the United States. Although Javier Milei is president of Argentina. Argentina is a major country. Who would have thought of that 5 years ago? And yet, Hans Hoppe and a whole bunch of other people are bitter critics of Javier Milei. Yeah. He didn't get rid of the central bank yet. I mean, he got rid of rent control. He lowered inflation. He got rid of bunch of bureaucrats. He's doing magnificent work, but he's not perfect. Well, even people in his own party don't agree with him, and people in the other parties are trying to get rid of him. He's doing the best he can. If Murray or Rothbard were alive, I'm sure Murray would pick Javier Milei up on his shoulders and march around with him in a ticker-tape parade. Why are they criticizing him? Because of Israel. He supports Israel, so therefore he's a bum. I mean, what's with these people? He's magnificent. Is he perfect? No, he's not perfect. But my goodness, he's magnificent.
In terms of the practical politics in the United States right now, what do you see as the biggest threat or the biggest antithesis to individual freedom?
Well, Ma'am Danny. What is he? He wants the warmth of collectivism versus the coldness of individualism, something like that.
Yes.
You couldn't, if he didn't exist, you couldn't have thought of that. I mean, he's a nut. He's a commie. And it's not just him. Bernie Sanders, another self-hating Jew. I mean, Bernie is Jewish, and he's a bitter opponent of Israel. And we have 3 or 4 people who are going to be congressmen who are Ma'am Danny-ites, or what do they call it? Democratic socialists or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a big threat. I mean, the Democratic Party was never that great, but what the heck? I mean, Bill Clinton, I'm now thinking Bill Clinton is great. That's pathetic to think that Bill Clinton is great, but, compared to these people, I mean, rent control. New York City is like the financial capital of the world. Yeah. And being the financial capital of the world is based on private property rights. And he's trying to nationalize or municipalize all rental housing. He has no respect for private property. The man is a menace. Which brings up another issue. Are we federalists or centralists? And that's another debate among libertarians. Should we support the federal or the local more? Well, I would say, ceteris paribus, other things equal, we should support the local more than the federal. Other things equal, because, if you don't, I'm now in the Seattle area. If I don't like it here, I can go to Portland, Oregon, no big deal, or I can go to Tacoma. If I don't like what's happening in the US, I have to go to Canada or Mexico, which is a lot more of a hassle. However, I think the proper libertarian view is neither centralization nor decentralization, but rather whatever is more libertarian. So, for example, if Donald Trump were to go to New York City and say, if you don't get rid of rent control, we're going to kick your butt, I'm a centralist. On the other hand, when Oregon legalized cocaine, I'm a decentralist. So it depends upon what the issue is. So sometimes you ask people, well, are you a Democrat or a Republican? And what they'll say was, I'm neither a Democrat or a Republican. I just look at the person. And if I like the person, I vote for him. And if I don't vote for him. Well, I think that's the right attitude towards centralism versus decentralism. Other things equal, we're decentralists. But a lot of times other things aren't equal, and the municipality is very bad. And then the central government should take over.
Okay. Walter, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here today. Where can people find you?
I'm all over the place. I've done a lot of debates and interviews like this one, and a lot of books. Just Google Walter Block, and you'll get me.
Awesome. Thank you again, Walter, and thank you, audience, for joining us today. This has been the Michael Liebowitz Show. Till next time.